Alright guys, so today we're going to go over some Q&A about expediting. So the first question is, do we have to run logs? And the answer is no. We're under 10,000 pounds, so we run no logs. We don't have to stop at weigh stations. And the other part of that is people asking about DOT physical or medical card. And the answer is no, for the most part. There are some carriers that require a medical card, but there's very few of them. Panther and FedEx are the two I can think of offhand. Barrett doesn't require one, and most other carriers do not. Alright, so the next question is, can you talk about how much time you have to make deliveries, how fast you have to drive, how long it takes to get loaded, what happens when there is a delay getting loaded, and does my carrier require me to take breaks on long runs? So there's several questions in there. The first one, how much time it takes to make the deliveries. Well, when these loads are bid with the carrier I'm with, they bid it at an average of 50 miles per hour. And so you take the amount of miles divided by the 50 miles an hour, and that's how much time you're usually quoting it at. Now, there are variables in there that make it sometimes longer. They usually ain't going to get no shorter, because you can't really get no shorter than that. I don't care if you're a team or not. If you can get there within the 50 mile an hour average. One of the variables would be if the arrival time that you're going to have, the place of business is closed. So you're obviously going to get that extended time to be there to make your delivery. So that's as far as how long it takes. So it can vary. As I said, if you take 50 miles an hour, divide it into a 1,000-mile run, you're given 20 hours to get that there. But for the most part, there's usually time, because I've found, for me personally, on a trip that isn't extremely long, that I'm going to average somewhere around 60 to 63 miles an hour for my trip overall, right in there. Also depending on the routes and whatnot. That's a good gauge to determine the amount of time that you're being given. So whenever you talk to any carriers about getting on with the carrier, that's one of the questions you can ask them is, what do they bid the load at as far as time-wise? Okay, so the thing is, the next part of this question was, how fast do I have to drive? Very rarely do I go above 67. The only time I may is if I'm on a really long run and it's pretty tight to where I only have a few hours for a nap, or there's very little time to spare, so I don't want to lose any time. So then I'll stay at around 70 or maybe 72, but it's very rare that I do that. That's just when I don't want to lose any time and I want to keep what time I have. But as I said, overall, my norm, 67 miles an hour. When it's 70, if it's 65, I'll still do 66, 67, but that's my norm. So how long does it take to get loaded? That varies depending on where you're getting loaded. There's one place in particular near Kansas City, Missouri, that it's almost a given you're going to be sitting there for a couple hours before you get loaded. For the most part, though, if I had to put an average, you're usually average in and out of there a half hour. I'd say average, because that's the time it takes you to usually find where you're going, get in there, check in, they get you loaded, get the paperwork signed, get your freight, secured, get everything situated, and then you're rolling. Say an average of about 30 minutes. But overall, it's gonna vary depending on the shipper as far as how quickly you're going to get loaded. What happens when there's a delay getting loaded? Well, not sure exactly what they're asking as far as what happens. There's several things that can happen due to that. If you most of the time there's a grace period of 2 hours. It's going to vary depending on the customer that your carrier is dealing with, as far as whether it's an hour or 2 hours, as far as the grace period you're given before there's actual any kind of penalty monetarily for sitting, which is the wait time. Detention pay is what they'd call it. Now, the downside to that is, say you hit that hour and 45 minute mark. You're not getting paid. You lost an hour and 45. And there's a lot of carriers that are kind of still like, oh, I want you to still make the time. I don't care about that hour and 45. We're not giving it back to you. Overall, basically, if you're tired, something happens, you can't make the trip, you got to stop, you stop. Who cares what the carrier says? If they let you go because you was too tired, then, the hell with them. But those are the things that can happen. It can mess up the whole flow of things, because maybe you wasn't going to make it through an area at rush hour, and now because of that hour and a half delay, you're going to hit the harder rush hour. There's so many different things that can happen due to getting a delay and being loaded. But overall, the biggest thing is if it's depending on the grace period of the customer that you guys are giving them, you can get paid detention pay if it takes too long. Other than that, depending on how long it's going to be, you take a nap, you do whatever. Your carrier may decide to just dry run the load and let them put it back out on the bid board. So there's a lot of variables in answering that question, so I hope I answered that well enough. Does my carrier require me to take a break on a long run? They don't require it. They, I'm sure, would hope that you take a break if it's a really long run, because they don't want people driving, unsafe. That's why the time is usually built in there. If there's a really long run, like say 1,500 miles or 2,000 miles at 50 miles an hour, there's a ton of time put in there for you to stop and sleep. So they know that you're going to stop and get rest. They don't require you to at a certain time. FedEx and Panther, I think, are two that do. They require so many hours of downtime within a 24-hour period. I'm not going to tell you exactly what that time is because I'm not 100% sure. Panther, I think it's 16 hours you can drive, and then you got to take 5 hours down. But any Panther drivers out there that can answer that question, go ahead. And same thing with FedEx. I don't know the exact regulations that they have for their required stop time. But my carrier that I'm with does not require it. They expect it to happen, though. All right, next question is, what is the paperwork process for the loads? Do you use TransFlow to submit bills and other paperwork? So the process is, normally you arrive at a shipper, you go in and check in. The shipper's going to give you copies of a BOL. They're going to more than likely have you sign off on one, and then they should give you at least 2 copies. And if they don't, you can ask them for more than 1 copy. Most of the time you can usually get another one. So they'll hand you 2 copies. One is for you, and one is for the consignee whenever you get to the other end and deliver your load. So you'll sign off on that paperwork. The shipper will keep their copy. You'll get your 2 copies. You go, you deliver. When you deliver, you're going to get whoever's in charge or whoever's driving the tow motor when they unload you. You're going to get them to print and sign and date the BOLs. And then you'll give them a copy. You take your copy. You'll go, yes, you can use TransFlow. There are some that you can use a cam scanner app. Some, like with Circle Logistics app and the Selectus app, you can do sending your BOL in, a copy of your BOL via those apps. And then after you've sent those in, each carrier is different on how quickly they want the hard copy, but at some point you'll send in the hard copy via mail, or if you get by the main office, you'll drop the main copies off then. Alright, so next question. What kind of van do you use? And do you recommend that van or something different? I'm in a 2019 Ford Transit 350, 3.5 EcoBoost Turbo. In the description below, I put the type of van that I'm running in, the dimension. All the relevant specs are in there as well. As far as what do I recommend, I'm partial to the Ford. I had an Econoline before I had the Transit. The Econolines were they were beasts. They were a workhorse. And so my thinking was to stay with the Transit, because you got some of the engineering, at least some of the engineering should go into these Transits that were in the Econolines. Although I did expect some hiccups, because anytime you get a new vehicle, there's probably going to be some hiccups that are going to, get it all figured out. I was hoping that they was going to put the 5.4s into these transits, but they didn't. They put the 3.5s. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not a car guy, but what little I do know, what I've read up on, the 3.5s are supposed to be pretty good engines as well. I've got 420,000 on my 17, and I've got 176,000 on this one. I love them. The only thing I don't like about the Transit is the leg room. I'm a bigger guy, so I get a little more spread out with my legs, and I hit my knees on both sides. But other than that, I like the Ford Transit. I would recommend them just because I enjoy them. I think they're pretty reliable. Cost of repairs and maintenance and everything isn't high. The back-end warranties are pretty good as far as if you get an engine replaced, transmission replaced, it's 3-year unlimited mileage warranty. And, I mean, the size of them are good. Now, again, depending on your business model or what you want out of your van is going to be dependent on what type of van you want or is good for you or right for you. A lot of people love the Sprinters because they're so long. You can get a dedicated bunk and still have room for 3 full-size skids. Me personally, it's not that big a deal, but that's what I recommend. I recommend the Ford Transit. All right, next question. If you have 3 to 4 hours of sleep time on a delivery, do you find it better to take 2 60 to 90-minute naps during the trip or get all 3 to 4 hours of sleep at once? Personally, if I have 3 or 4 hours, I always want an hour left after my sleep time. Whatever I do sleep, I want an hour left of time for something to go wrong if it's going to go wrong, at least an hour. So if I have 4 hours left, normally what I would do with that, I mean, some of it's going to change depending on the mileage of the trip. But we'll just say normal circumstances, it's a solid run that I'm going to need to get some sleep. 4 hours sleep I've got, 4 hours I have to play with. I'm going to stop and sleep 2 to 2.5 hours of that time all at once. I'm going to do it before I'm extremely tired, because if I wait until I'm extremely tired, that 2.5 hour sleep isn't going to do shit. I'm going to get that sleep as I start to get tired, and that 2.5 hours is going to make me feel more rested. That gives me a half hour to play with as far as to take a quick power nap if I didn't quite get enough sleep. Gives me a half hour plus my hour play time on the grace period time on the delivery. So, as I said, 4 hours to play with altogether to start off, 2.5 hours at sleep all at once. Then I'm going to drive, and then, as I said, if I need that half hour for anything else, I'll take a quick half hour break, and then I'll continue on, and I'll arrive at my delivery at least an hour early. So at least I have that time. If something happens, traffic gets a little worse, or whatever it may be, I still have an hour. Or, worst case scenario, I'm extremely tired, I still have that hour to get a little 20 minutes or a half hour or whatever it may be. So that's how I would handle that 3 to 4 hours to play with. Okay, so next question. Saying basically, it's wanting to know, have I heard of anybody getting their vans broken into if they leave their van alone with the load? Because you want to kind of, I've mentioned before, you want to try to be with your van or at least right by your van or seeing your van while you're loaded especially. Definitely have heard of people getting their vans broken into. I haven't heard of anybody's freight being stolen specifically. The worst thing I have heard is somebody had a load in their van, ended up getting a hotel. While they were at the hotel, they must not have been making their payments, and their van was found and their van was repoed. Towed it right off the lot, freight and all. So then they had to go through a bunch of BS for them to get the freight and, to return the freight and be able to get the freight shipped by that carrier. So that's the worst thing I've seen happen over not being with your van with the freight. Now this question is, do you leave your van running while you're sleeping for heat and or AC? Now, the van setup I have now, I can run my AC or heat independently from the van running. I have a generator for the AC unit, and I have auxiliary power for the heating unit. But before I had any of that, yes, I did leave the van running whenever I needed either heat or AC. And I would only do that at extreme times. Like if I knew that I really had to have a good rest, I couldn't afford to keep half-ass sleeping, because that's going to happen. If you come out here in a van and you don't have a fan or any kind of anything to help you with the extreme heat or the extreme cold, you're going to feel rough. You're going to be sleep deprived. You're not going to get any good rest. So I hated it. I hated doing it, especially in the heat. I didn't mind it so much when it was cold. I mean, I never liked to idle it, but in the heat is when I really disliked idling it. But yes, I would. In order to get some good sleep for 3-4 hours, yes, I'm going to leave it running. Crack the windows a little bit. Obviously, you know, keep an eye on your van, make sure everything's running as should be, exhaust as it should be. You know, have a CO2 detector in your van. But yeah, certainly run your van if you have to, man. There's no sense in being out there and being so sleep deprived that you're unsafe on the road. Now, there are some locations, as far as to deal with the heat, that they have idle air and whatnot. But yeah, you gotta, if you got to, you got to, man. And if you're with the fleet owner that tells you shouldn't or can't, you don't want to be with them, because they're not concerned about you. They're more concerned about their vehicle than they are you. Now, rightly so, they should be concerned about their vehicle, but if they're to that point that they know they don't have any comforts in there to take care of the extreme temperatures, or they're not going to help you get in a hotel, or you're not, you know, because it's really tough for people to have to pay for a hotel all the time when they need to get, you know, warmed up or cooled down, because you just don't. Working for an owner, you're just not going to get a shit ton of money like that. So that's my thing. Definitely idle it. Alright guys, so I'm going to get off here, man. I hope that I answered some of you guys' questions out there. And if you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section below. I want to try and start doing these Q&As a little more consistently. So any questions you have, whether you feel they're stupid or not, go ahead and ask them, and I will reply to them, and I will put them on these videos. So until the next video, man, you guys be safe. I'll holler at you.